We've talked about stages, so now let's jump into the meat of what I want in Splatoon 3, and that of course is, well, pretty much everything else. So let's conclude this little round of Splatoon 3 videos, at least for right now, and dive straight into it. First up is the weapons and specials. Now to be honest, I don't really have any ideas at the moment for any new weapons or specials, but I can tell you about what I want to see return from the previous games. First of all, I think it's safe to say that all the previous weapon types will be coming back. And of course there's going to be new weapon types as well. In fact, we've already seen one of the new weapons, which happens to be some kind of bow that shoots 3 rounds of ink at once, so that's pretty neat. And of course we'll get to see what other new weapons are coming down the line. Now as for the specials, I'm actually really excited, as it looks like they're bringing back the Inkzooka from the original game, albeit a bit retooled, which makes me hope that we could potentially see some other classics from the original return, like the Kraken, Ink Strike, and the Killer Whale. I kinda understood why they didn't bring back the Ink Strike last time due to its reliance on the gamepad, but there was zero reason whatsoever for the Kraken and the Killer Whale to not return, at least that I can think of, but hey, hopefully they'll return this time. Similarly to the stages, however, I don't feel as strongly for the specials in Splatoon 2 as I do for the ones in the first game, but there are some ones from Splatoon 2 that I do like and I do want to see come back, like the Tenta Missiles, Inkjet, Splashdown, and Booyah Bomb, although those last two are somewhat similar, so they probably wouldn't bring back both, but I'd be fine with either one. Next up is the core of Splatoon, and that of course is the multiplayer. I'm mostly fine with the way it's done right now, but of course there are some tweaks I would like to see. For starters, I think they should split the ranked modes into their own separate playlists instead of being shuffled around every few hours, so you can play whatever mode you wish at any time. And considering that in Splatoon 2, they made it so every ranked mode had their own separate ranking as opposed to the first game where they all shared the same one, I think this would be the next logical step. Second would be the ability to swap weapons and clothes while you're waiting in a lobby. Not much to say there, as that would just be a very nice quality of life feature that you think would be there already. And speaking of things that you think would be there already, how about the ability to back out when you're in a lobby or exit in the middle of a match? I don't care if they flash a billion warning screens about how my rank might be affected or how you might be banned for 20 minutes. Just give us this option. Every other shooter has this. Why not this one? Oh, and this is more of a personal thing, but I would love it if they changed the Rainmaker so it functions like it did in the first game. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, in Splatoon 1, the Rainmaker would shoot this huge, big tornado of ink, but in Splatoon 2, they nerfed it by making it shoot a relatively small ball of ink that explodes upon hitting its target. Now, of course, I understand why they did this, because the ink tornado was, to be frank, kind of busted in the original, but to be honest, that's part of the reason why I liked that mode so much. It's just not quite the same in Splatoon 2. Oh, and finally, as far as new modes are concerned, I don't really have any ideas for a proper new mode, but I do think a mode where they had more players would be neat. And no, I am not saying they should add a Battle Royale mode. Although I admit a part of me is curious about how they would do something like that, but what I'm talking about is more something along the lines of Ground War from Call of Duty, where the matches play the same, just with more players. So say instead of the usual 4v4, it's a 6v6, or heck, maybe even an 8v8. Now, of course, the maps would have to be probably expanded in order to properly accommodate the increased amount of players. They could also add more objectives as well to help the players be more spaced out and not get crammed together as much. Like, for example, you could add a second tower to tower control that has a separate path and goal than the first one that splits up the players more so they're not all crowding around the one tower. Now, of course, that's all just an idea, one that frankly probably won't even happen. But it is most certain that there will be some new mode in the multiplayer, and I'll certainly be looking forward to it, whatever it may be. Next up is Salmon Run, the co-op survival mode introduced in Splatoon 2. Now, fun fact, this is a mode I had been wanting since the first game back in 2015, or at least the base concept. My idea back then was a mode where you fought off waves of Octolings and their various Octo compadres. Basically think COD Zombies but in Splatoon. And as it turned out, someone at Nintendo must have thought the same, as 2 years later that wish became reality. Well, sort of. While I do like Salmon Run, it wasn't quite the Splatoon co-op survival mode that I had hoped for, and there are some aspects of it that I think can be improved. The first one is the 3-wave limit. Now I get why they did this, as the core objective of the mode is to gather a certain number of eggs before the time is up each round. But I would like the option to have a just straight up survival mode where you don't have to worry about the eggs, and it's just about surviving as many rounds as possible like in Zombies. Also, I think some of the maps could definitely be a bit bigger, as in certain maps like Salmonid Smokeyard, it can get really hectic when you're on the final round, when there's enemies literally everywhere and there is zero move around whatsoever, and you are almost guaranteed to die, or at least that's what happens to me a lot of the time. Maybe my teammates suck or something, but I'm just pointing it out. Another feature that would be nice to have is a private match mode like there is for the normal multiplayer, so you can change the map and the weapons to get whatever you want. Oh, and last but not least is of course the one thing that literally everyone can agree on, the thing that people were complaining about even before the game came out. Get rid of the timed rotation nonsense and just let us play Salmon Run whenever the heck we want. Now of course, everything I just said is going under the assumption that Salmon Run is coming back. But actually, I think there's a good chance that it isn't going to be returning and will instead be replaced by a new mode. Why? Well, granted, we haven't seen much of Splatsville yet, but I'm willing to bet it's because of this building they specifically draw attention to in the trailer. I believe this right here is the entrance to a potential new co-op mode, whatever it might be. But of course, only time will tell. Ah yes, the campaign, the often forgot about single-player component of Splatoon. The campaigns in the Splatoon games have always been solid for what they were, and I have a soft spot for the first game's campaign in particular, but of course they could definitely use some expanding from being a quote-unquote glorified tutorial, as I've heard some people call them in the past, to something more proper. Now, I'm not really one of those people that's all that privy to the lore of the series all that much, but I do know that a lot of it comes from the single-player modes, with the hidden scrolls you find and such that explain the backstory and history of the characters and world. And we do know that Splatoon 3 takes place after the events of the Chaos vs. Order Splatfest in Splatoon 2. And what does that mean exactly for the story? Well, I don't really know. Again, I'm not really privy to that side of Splatoon too much, but I'm sure whatever we get for the single player will be solid as always. But I hope that now that with the game taking place in a brand new location and situation compared to the last two, they will switch things up a bit. But of course, we'll just have to wait and see. Well, that's just about everything I've got to say about what I want to see in Splatoon 3, at least for right now. Of course, it's still early days as the game isn't set to release until sometime in 2022, and I suspect it'll be around summertime like with the last two games, so we're still over a year away from release, which means, of course, plenty of time for speculation and info drops, so don't be surprised if I decide to do another video on this game sometime in the future. As for when I think we're going to get to see the game next, I'm guessing we're going to have to wait till E3. And yes, E3 is happening this year, or at least according to rumors. Whether Nintendo is going to be a part of it or not, though, is still up for debate. But heck, considering that Nintendo Directs seem to be back and here to stay, I wouldn't worry too much about that. So with that being said, this is Logan599XP, and I will see you guys next time.